September 3rd, 2025, 2:14 a.m., Norfolk Naval Station, Virginia. The unthinkable shattered the night. Explosions tore through the world's largest naval base, lighting the docks like a war zone. Russian Kilo-class submarines, nicknamed Black Holes for their silence, had slipped past Atlantic defenses. From beneath the waves, they launched Kalibr cruise missiles, each worth $1.5 million, straight into the heart of America's fleet. Within minutes, the pride of the Navy, a $13 billion Ford-class carrier under maintenance, was struck. Nearby, a destroyer pier burned, and a fuel depot holding 10 million gallons erupted in fireballs seen for miles. By dawn, the Pentagon's answer was swift. B-2 stealth bombers, F-35 squadrons, and Virginia-class submarines surged into action, hunting the attackers. But what followed went far beyond retaliation. Was this the night the Cold War finally turned hot? Join me to find out. Russia's Northern Fleet, based at Severomorsk, is the backbone of its naval power, and home to the Project 636.3 Kilo-class submarines, nicknamed Black Holes for their silence. Running on diesel-electric engines, they can vanish beneath thermal layers and wait for hours, nearly undetectable. Their deadliest weapon, the Kalibr cruise missile, able to strike targets up to 2,000 kilometers away with near-pinpoint accuracy.
Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry has published some images which it says shows the launch of the Kalibr cruise missile.
Norfolk Naval Station, Virginia, was the perfect target. It is the largest naval base on Earth, home to Ford-class carriers, destroyers, and the Atlantic Fleet's logistics backbone. To hit Norfolk is to hit the heart of American naval power, a message that no harbor is safe. The warning signs were there. Russian naval drills near Kaliningrad, submarines shadowing NATO carriers, drones intercepted over the Black Sea, and back in 2018, Moscow shocked the world by firing Kalibr missiles from a submerged sub in the Mediterranean, proving its reach extended far beyond Europe. By 2025, with U.S. attention shifting toward China, Atlantic defenses had thinned. The gap was all Russia needed. What no one realized was that those silent hunters were already in position. It began in an instant. 2:14 a.m., September 3rd, 2025. A massive fireball erupted above the southern edge of Naval Station Norfolk. Security cameras caught the moment, an expanding orange bloom climbing 200 feet into the sky, followed by a rolling wave of heat that lit the night like sunrise. The first Russian Kalibr missile had slammed into a fuel depot. Within seconds, alarms across the base screamed awake. 90 seconds later, 4 more missiles ripped through the air, slamming into the docks, where America's most advanced warship, the USS Gerald R. Ford, CVN-78, was undergoing maintenance at Pier 12. The shockwaves blasted out windows miles away. The pier shook violently, sending sailors scrambling from their barracks in confusion and fear. The carrier's flight deck, packed with equipment and scaffolding, became a sea of burning steel. Sparks showered down into hangars below as fuel lines burst, igniting secondary fires. Nearby, the USS Laboon, DDG-58, an R. Lee Burke-class destroyer moored at the same pier, took the brunt of a blast.
USS Laboon will return to Naval Station Norfolk tomorrow. The destroyer deployed 9 months ago.
Its superstructure twisted, radar arrays melted, and a gaping hole was torn into its hull. The nightmare was only beginning. A 6th missile struck the already burning fuel depot. 10 million gallons of aviation fuel went up in a chain of explosions, throwing a column of fire so bright it was seen from downtown Norfolk, 12 miles away. The blast shattered cars in parking lots, scorched helicopters on the tarmac, and sent burning debris raining down onto other piers. The numbers told the scale of disaster. 6 confirmed missile strikes, 42 sailors killed instantly, more than 200 wounded, many with burns and blast injuries. Emergency crews rushed into a base that now looked like a war zone. By sunrise, preliminary estimates put the damage at more than $20 billion, a staggering loss inflicted in less than 5 minutes. At that same moment, U.S. command centers lit up. NORAD raised its readiness to DEFCON 3, a level unseen since the Gulf War. Phones rang in the Pentagon's National Military Command Center. Was this the beginning of a wider strike? Were Russian bombers or nuclear missiles next? The first priority was survival. Firefighting teams fought to contain the inferno at Pier 12, while base security locked down all gates, fearing a coordinated ground assault. Above them, the skies were sealed. Within half an hour, P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft were scrambled from Naval Air Station Jacksonville, tasked with hunting the submarines responsible.
P-8 Poseidon aircraft was tracking the Moskva in the hours before the ship was attacked. The U.S. aircraft had shared the location.
Under the waves, the hunt was already beginning. The USS Delaware, SSN 791, a Virginia-class fast-attack submarine stationed near Cape Hatteras, received urgent orders: find and eliminate the enemy before they could strike again. The Delaware slipped quietly into deeper waters, activating its sonar arrays, listening for the faintest trace of Russian propellers. Meanwhile, intelligence reports trickled in. Satellite tracking and radar signatures pointed to 2 Russian Kilo-class submarines lurking roughly 250 miles off the U.S. coast. Their sudden appearance stunned commanders. How had they crossed the Atlantic undetected? How close were they to launching another salvo? Inside the Pentagon, debates raged. Strike them immediately with long-range bombers, or wait to confirm their positions. Each minute of hesitation risked another barrage against Norfolk, or perhaps New York, Washington, or even civilian shipping lanes. But striking Russian submarines carried its own risks. Escalation. If Moscow considered their destruction an act of war, the next move might be nuclear. By dawn, the order was given. The submarines had to be destroyed before they could vanish into the Atlantic depths. U.S. forces surged into motion. P-8S began dropping sonobuoys in vast search grids. The Delaware pressed forward, sonar pings echoing through the darkness. Above, F-35Cs armed with anti-ship missiles swept the coastlines, ready to strike if a sub surfaced. On radar screens in command centers, green blips multiplied. Unknown contacts, unmanned craft, possibly Russian decoys, appeared across the search area. Confusion spread. Were these additional submarines, fishing boats, or something more sinister? Then came the chilling moment. Operators watching drone feeds caught sight of objects breaking the waves. Dozens of small craft, low and fast, moving in swarms toward the east coast. They weren't submarines. They were drones, launched from somewhere beyond the horizon, programmed to jam sensors and mislead defenses. The room fell silent. In the chaos of fires, explosions, and scrambled orders, one realization gripped the American command. This wasn't over. And then, the screens lit up with something no one expected. The Atlantic was tense, a vast gray silence pierced only by the hum of engines and the distant crackle of communications. Wave 1 began with the drones. MQ-4C, Triton drones, wings spanning 131 feet, lifted off in formation from Jacksonville. Their sensors cut through fog and darkness, scanning thousands of square miles of ocean. Every sonar ping, every heat signature was logged. Around 5:30 a.m., the first anomaly appeared. Unusual warmth on the sea surface. Fleeting shadows just below. Kilo-class submarines surfacing briefly to recharge their batteries, their propellers leaving nothing but faint turbulence.
Improved Kilo-class AK Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky submarine. This submarine is considered...
The drones followed, eyes of steel and electricity, whispering coordinates back to command centers on the mainland. By mid-morning, Wave 2 rolled in, the air power. From Whiteman Air Force Base, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted silently, carrying AGM-158 JASSMER missiles, each capable of traveling over 500 kilometers to strike hardened targets. Their stealth coatings shimmered under the rising sun as they banked over the Atlantic, crossing into enemy waters with surgical precision. Meanwhile, F-35C, Lightning IIs from the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, positioned off the Florida coast, streaked across the horizon. Engines roared, radar cross-sections minimal, each pilot aware that one miscalculation could end their life in a flash. Communications buzzed constantly, coordinates relayed, targeting confirmed, subs detected, decoys ignored. The third wave was a duel beneath the waves. The USS Delaware, a Virginia-class attack submarine, had made contact. Sonar operators leaned over consoles, listening to clicks and hums, each sound amplified in the quiet metal belly of the vessel. The Kilo sub tried to escape, slipping silently under thermal layers of the Atlantic, but Delaware tracked it relentlessly. Mark 48 torpedoes were readied, warheads primed. The Russians deployed countermeasure decoys, chaff, noisemakers, decoy torpedoes. But the Delaware's computer analyzed patterns, rejected false readings, and fired. Seconds later, a muffled but unmistakable explosion rocked the ocean floor. The first Kilo was gone. Silence returned for a heartbeat, and then the radios buzzed. Another target. Wave 4. The Russian retaliation came like a hammer. The second Kilo, deeper and slower, fired 3 Kalibr missiles aimed at Cape Hatteras. The first two were swiftly intercepted by SM-6 missiles launched from the damaged but still functional USS Laboon, the missile streaking upward in a blaze of smoke and light. The third slipped through, hitting a civilian shipping lane. An oil tanker erupted in fire, flames licking the water. Smoke boiled into the morning sky, sending a plume visible for miles. A tragic reminder that war does not distinguish between military and civilian. Meanwhile, mini-climaxes erupted across the battle. On the carrier decks of the USS Gerald R. Ford, crew members fought raging fires, yanking hoses across scorched metal, shouting over sirens and alarms. F-35s destroyed a Russian supply ship near the Azores, believed to be resupplying the Kilo subs, sending a massive explosion into the Atlantic. U.S. Navy SEALS executed a raid on a covert listening post in Cuba, suspected of coordinating the missile strike, moving silently under darkness, leaving only confusion and smoke in their wake. Hours passed like seconds. Every sonar ping, every radar blip, every missile trajectory was a heartbeat. The second Kilo tried to vanish beneath thermal layers and ocean currents, but the P-8 Poseidon patrol aircraft had eyes everywhere. Relaying positions to the Delaware, coordinating with satellites and drones, they boxed the sub in. The final Mark 48 torpedo was launched in the late afternoon. Seconds later, a muffled shockwave, a plume of debris on the surface, and the Kilo was gone. By evening, the Atlantic was quiet again. No explosions, no heat signatures, no drones buzzing overhead. Waves lapped against the hulls of U.S. ships that had fought all day. The battle was over. 2 Kilo-class submarines destroyed. 1 supply vessel sunk. Scores of missiles intercepted. Yet the smell of smoke, oil, and salt hung heavy in the air. Sailors and pilots alike knew the silence was temporary. Somewhere in the vast Atlantic, someone was planning the next move. But Moscow wasn't finished. The next move would change everything. By late afternoon, the chaos that had engulfed Norfolk Naval Station began to fade. The Russian threat had collapsed. Both Kilo-class submarines lay at the bottom of the Atlantic, their sleek black hulls crushed by torpedoes and explosions. The U.S. Navy, battered but unbroken, had regained full control of the Atlantic waters. Patrol aircraft circled, submarines ran silent sweeps, and surface ships restored perimeter defenses. For the first time since 2:14 a.m., commanders could breathe. The toll was staggering. 78 Americans were dead, and more than 400 wounded, some burned, others with shattered limbs. Material losses were catastrophic. Estimates climbed to $20 to $25 billion in destroyed ships, fuel depots, hangars, and aircraft. On the Russian side, 96 sailors were lost with the 2 Kilo subs, along with a supply vessel believed to have been supporting their operation. Families on both sides received grim calls from command centers they never wanted to answer. Amid the numbers, human stories emerged that would linger in memory. Petty Officer Ramirez, only 23, ran into a burning hangar aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford. Smoke choked the air, metal twisted under the heat, and flames licked at fuel lines. Ramirez guided 5 trapped sailors through the inferno, carrying one on his shoulders, dragging another by the arm, ignoring the burning deck beneath him. By the time he collapsed outside, covered in soot and sweat, the hangar was a furnace, but 5 lives had been saved. On the other side, the human cost was felt quietly beneath the waves. The Russian submarine commander, whose voice had guided his crew through the Atlantic like a ghost in the darkness, sent a final transmission before his vessel was lost. Mission complete. Tell my family I did my duty. The words echoed across secure channels for hours, a haunting reminder that war is a human endeavor, not just machinery and strategy. Politically, the ramifications were immediate. The Pentagon publicly declared the strike an act of war, elevating tensions with Moscow to a level not seen in decades. NATO convened an emergency session, allies gathering in Brussels to discuss coordinated defense measures and rapid deployment strategies. While US and NATO officials prepared for possible retaliation, Russia officially denied involvement. Kremlin spokespeople insisted the attack had been carried out by rogue captains acting independently, a claim met with deep skepticism in Western capitals. Meanwhile, at Norfolk, the focus shifted from battle to rebuilding. Fires were extinguished, hulls repaired, and the wounded treated. Crew rotations were accelerated, temporary barracks erected, and emergency fuel supplies delivered from nearby bases. Norfolk still burned, but the political firestorm had only begun. The attack on Norfolk rippled far beyond the docks, beyond the fire and smoke. Politically, the United States moved quickly to fortify the Atlantic. New radar networks were installed along the East Coast, stretching from Maine to Florida, capable of tracking submarines and low-flying aircraft hundreds of miles offshore. Anti-submarine patrols by NATO allies increased, with German, British, and Dutch frigates joining the U.S. Navy in coordinated sweeps. The message was clear. The Atlantic would never again be an open highway for stealth attacks. Across the globe, Moscow and Beijing responded differently. Russia denied direct involvement, but simultaneously announced joint naval exercises with China in the Pacific and Atlantic, signaling readiness to challenge American power. Satellite imagery showed Chinese destroyers sailing alongside Russian cruisers, practicing anti-submarine drills and missile launches.
The latest Russian submarine of the Pacific Fleet launched the new Kalibr missile and successfully destroyed a coastal target.
The message was unmistakable. Deterrence, intimidation, and escalation were all on display. Back on U.S. soil, the psychological shock was palpable. The public, accustomed to distant threats, now faced the terrifying possibility that even the nation's most secure naval hub was vulnerable. Headlines compared it to Pearl Harbor or September 11th, moments when American power had been challenged and innocence shattered in an instant. Veterans called it the worst attack on American soil in a generation. Citizens lined up at recruitment offices, while defense contractors received a sudden surge in inquiries about naval technology and missile defenses. Norfolk, once considered untouchable, had become a symbol of fragility. But beyond strategy and numbers, the attack left a deeper mark, a sense that war was no longer abstract. For sailors and officers, every sonar ping, every distant radar blip, carried a weight that had not existed before. The oceans, once vast and concealing, had been exposed. Silent kilo submarines, stealth bombers, and missiles had reminded the world that modern warfare is fast, precise, and deadly, and that even the deepest waters no longer hide secrets. Reflection settled across military briefings and civilian conversations alike. The Atlantic had been quiet since the last explosion, the smoke cleared, and the fires extinguished. Yet the memory lingered. The night Norfolk burned had proven that peace is fragile, that even the strongest defenses can be breached. Commanders, sailors, and citizens knew one thing with certainty: the calm would not last forever. The Atlantic was quiet once more, but history warns it never stays silent for long. The next strike, the next escalation, could come at any moment, and when it does, the world will be listening. On September 3, 2025, Russian Kilo-class submarines struck Norfolk Naval Station, hitting fuel depots, destroyer piers, and the Ford-class carrier under maintenance, leaving America's most powerful naval base in flames. The loss was staggering: dozens killed, hundreds wounded, and billions in material destroyed. Yet the U.S. response was swift and overwhelming. B-2 stealth bombers, F-35 squadrons, submarines, and patrol aircraft hunted the attackers across the Atlantic, sinking both Kilo subs and their support vessel, restoring control over the waters. The night Norfolk burned may be remembered as the spark that reignited the fire of global war, a warning that even the strongest defenses are never invulnerable. If you want to see how the next clash unfolds, subscribe and join me in the next mission.